I told myself this year, as we got closer to Halloween, that I wasn't going to punk out and not watch any real scary situations. One of the things I wanted to try to do was to get into the movies that I had been avoiding or hadn't watched for whatever reason, to get into at least one or two of those this year and really see for myself if some of these movies were as scary or as disturbing as I had been led to believe. So, with that in mind, I finally sought out a few of those movies and watched them. One of the ones I wanted to talk about today is a movie that I had actively been avoiding for some time, but I've now watched it and have some things to say about it. So, get ready. Today's movie, Hereditary. Let's talk about it. I'm going to say off the top that while this movie had some disturbing elements, I don't think this was as scary as I'd heard it was over the years. I think at this point now, I've finally seen all of Ari Aster's films to this point. And having come through this one, I thought, like Midsommar before it, when I watched it last year, I heard similar that the Midsommar was worse than Hereditary. It was more unsettling or whatever it is, and I didn't think Midsommar was as scary. It was more atmospherically disturbing, I think, to me. As with any of these movies, everyone has a tolerance level that might be higher or lower than someone else's. And for me, I think Hereditary was a similar situation. There was only one element of the movie that was the most unsettling for me, and I'll get to that. But before I do, in case you don't know, I wanted to get into what this movie is about. So it's about the Graham family who has lost their matriarch of the family, and they have to then deal with the result of that loss. So grief and just the general sadness and things that come with loss. But beneath that, there's something more sinister that they have to grapple with, a family history that they have unwittingly inherited, and that begins to make things very challenging for the family. Annie Graham, played by Toni Collette, is our focal point. She is the daughter who has lost her mother. And we come to find out that through Annie, there is a series of things that were mysterious that she didn't really know about her mother. What's unfortunate about that is that then does come back to haunt Annie and the rest of her family to devastating effect. Hereditary is one of those movies that, like I think some of the best horror movies, work because of the family element that allows us to connect with these people. As members of our own families, there are elements in what we see about their dynamics and their relationships that we can relate to, whether or not those kinds of things are in our family specifically, or we've seen them elsewhere. They're tangible. And make no mistake, Hereditary is a good movie. And I found it to be overall, though, way more emotional than scary. Just from and I've mentioned this before about other movies that have similar elements that deal with like familial threads. I found myself like crying more than being more scared. And probably some of this probably has something to do with, I recently lost a family member. Some of you know this. And it's, we're right now as a family in the midst of grief still. It's still fairly fresh. And I think some of that was seeping into my experience of watching this movie, and where you have to go through all your, the belongings of your loved one. Like there's boxes and things that you put in. You got to go in and look. You're finding all these pictures and you're finding all these things about them that some of which you might have known, and then you're just understanding other areas of your family member that you maybe didn't really get to talk about as much, or whatever the case is. Those elements were resonant for me. as a viewer. And just once there's a void that's there, and you're struggling with, wrestling with what it is to now exist in this void after you've lost someone who has had a profound impact on you, who has had a presence perhaps that's quite large, quite looming, and now that it's just gone, like there's an emptiness there that you have to sort of reconcile with, and that feels like something that Annie is very much grappling with. She's grappling with the results of having grown up with a mother like the mother she had, and has been forced to reckon with how she is as a mother to her children, Peter and Charlie, and also then how she's been sort of as a wife, as a partner to her husband Stephen, who is played by Gabriel Byrne, who's been he's been super supportive and just trying to help keep things together, whatever it is. And I think those things is why the movie really works. And for a large portion of the film, it's very grounded in that way. The script, I think, supports that too. Like you see real dynamics at play. This is a family, as I said, in the midst of grief, but that's not all that's going on. We also get a sense that there is a history of tensions within the family that have been exacerbated by this recent death and then the subsequent grief, which is another thing you see in families. Just like when you think about like holidays and things that bring families together, birthdays, holidays seem to amplify the already interesting dynamics that might already be at play year round. There are certain things that bring that out, bring some of the characters in your family out more. So birthdays, holidays, new life, when somebody brings a new baby over, a death in the family, all these things seem to exacerbate stuff that's already there. And you see the Graham family actively trying to work on some of these things to some extent. And then you see people, avoiding things, which has also felt very real. Sometimes there's real conflict and real tension that the easy thing to do is to go to the bar and get a drink and not talk about it. Or in Annie's case, go out and see a movie when she's really trying to find ways to cope with the grief and the resulting cascading effect that has on her family. And it's really beautiful to in that way to witness, these are some real things that are happening to these people that I know personally I've seen within my own family, but also I've seen with dearest friends in their families, and as sort of how humans navigate really challenging things. And everybody has their own way of doing it, and the Grahams have their way. Like Midsummer, and actually really like all of Ari Aster's movies, there is a huge component that adds to those films, which is atmosphere. Each of the films have a different atmosphere, and I think with Hereditary, there's a specific atmosphere that you get a sense of not necessarily like the stuff that you feel when you watch any horror movie in a house. Like, so the house they're living, it's a big house, which already sets you up, and it's remote, it's out. So there's two things already that sets you up for at night, particularly how uncomfortable it might be to be in a place like that at night. But what's also interesting is that I've talked about this before about Midsummer and how a lot of the scenes in that movie take place in the daytime, and it's still unsettling and still scary. And something about experiencing horror elements as an audience member in the daytime is still scary, but in a unique way. And I felt similar with Hereditary. The house in the daytime also feels unsettling because depending on where the light is, where the sunlight is in a given time of day, there are still shadows in that big house. And shadows, have always been sort of primally scary, I think, in some ways. In the daytime and the nighttime, for me, there was sequences that were unsettling. So there's that also adds to the piece of the atmosphere that makes it scary. You have, I think also what adds to the atmosphere is the cinematography. How it's shot amplifies that. That's a weird angle here. There's a lot of weird angles in this movie that puts you off balance. There's a couple, I think, upside down shots that transition into right side up shots. There's a couple of those in Midsummer as well. That also, I think in both cases it serves to keep the audience off balance. You see that in the nighttime sequences too, when people are sleeping. It does something to your to your brain, where it feels like how it does when you wake up in the middle of the night. How you're not upright immediately. You're like this, and you see things weirdly. And so sometimes you might see a shadow in the room, and it looks like a head, or it looks like a person, or whatever. Those were, I think, the elements that actually were more unsettling, because those things are real. You see that in real life. And movies have not helped, I think, our collective psyche with things like that. I think those things can seep into our dreams and become nightmares, or just make sleeping an unsettling experience. So you have to turn over and not look at the walls, or you have to stare at the wall, or whatever. Stare at the wall that's closest to you, or whatever. And so in that way, again, the movie is effective, and the cinematography is a large piece of that. And while I'm there, the cinematography is top notch. There are beautiful shots of everything in the movie. There are great tracking shots, and they're just so artfully constructed. Paul Pogorzelski is a master. He also worked on Midsummer as well. And the camera work on display that he does in this movie is just it's beautiful, actually. Even in some of the more sinister looking sequences, very well shot. The acting, that's the other thing I think that really makes this movie. Toni Collette absolutely devours this movie. Everything is being funneled through her, and the way she plays not only grief, but frustration, despair, sadness. She's experiencing a ton of stuff, and all of that feels, again, I think even if I hadn't lost a family member, it would be something else. But I think in grappling with that personally, watching her felt that much bigger. Like it was just this huge, like she was calling on her performance was primal. There was something elemental about it. Like she was channeling like storms into her performance. Even when it was quiet, when it was, when she had to get small, and there's a physical element to it too, where you have to, there's a lot of, so much is coursing through her veins that she had to get really big and then really do a lot of stuff physically, and easily she made the movie. I think the movie, it would be a very different movie without Toni Collette. She just destroyed this role. Gabriel Byrne was wonderfully understated. He was consistent throughout the movie, even when he had to get a little bit, when he had to show more emotion. It worked for the context, but he felt very much like a character who was written to be almost like he was in the shadow of the family. He was a person who was in the shadow of the family, of the looming, which really is to say he was in the shadow, like everyone was, of Annie's mother, who the grandmother was the matriarch of the family. She was sort of the person who everything funnels down from her. Stephen was just the unfortunate. He married into a family, and the result is that he was the one constant that was holding everything together, really, or trying to. And I think Gabriel Byrne did a wonderful job. But Peter, played by Alex Wolff, he was the next best performer, I think, in this movie. He had a couple different emotional pushes in this movie that were really something to behold. And of course, I can't talk about Alex Wolff without mentioning Millie Shapiro, who again wasn't in the movie very long, but she was sufficiently creepy as a kid, but also she felt like a kid who is withdrawing after the death of someone she cared about, which is something that, again, that happens. That happens. And so I was very much with her. She's the kid who keeps her little book around, and she does all these drawings, and it seems like she's like weird, but a lot of kids have a lot of kids are weird a little bit. They have like weird drawings and weird hobbies and weird things they do. and I think she was very good. And I hadn't seen her in. I'm sure she's in other things too. I haven't seen her in too many things, but I thought she was really something in this movie. And I learned. I think this is probably her first movie. I wouldn't have guessed. She seemed like she was already a pro. She had been doing this for some time, so she was very good. Something else about this movie that struck me, going back to the atmosphere of it, was just the way sound design is used is really great, and how certain things come back and echoes and things where you think you hear something. There's a sound or something that reminds you of someone who you knew who might have passed away. That there's like these different things that like it's all around you. So sound design is another key thing that makes this movie feel alive. Great job. Oh, I also have to talk about Ann Dowd, who many people might know from Handmaid's Tale, or if you've seen her earlier, like she was in a few episodes of Law and Order. She's always great in everything. She was great in this movie too. But I have to say, there's something about how casting can do 90 to 95% of the work for the character that someone's playing in a movie. So Ann Dowd, I think, particularly at this point in 2018, I think when the movie came out, Handmaid's Tale had already been running. And so there's something about it that when the minute she shows up on screen, you're not 100% sure of her motives. I wasn't. Now, and I think that's part of the genius of casting someone like Ann Dowd. You're lured in by this warmth and this just loveliness. And there was the scene where you first meet her in this movie actually made me quite emotional because of the compassion that she showed Annie when Annie's deciding whether or not she wants to go into her support group meeting. It was so beautiful. There was such a meeting of like a heart to heart in it that was like a one-to-one situation of two women who have lost family members and are meeting at a place where they can hopefully connect with each other and have a sense of openness in that, because there's not a lot of people you can talk to about that outside of other people who are also grieving, at least for them in that moment. But the way Ann Dowd shows up into the scene, it's immediately, she's such a sweet lady, and you hope that Annie gets to have that connection with this other woman who's older than her, who's like a mother, and maybe hopefully a warmer mother than the one she lost. We come to find out that Ann Dowd's character has other things going on with her that the movie geniusly gives us clues about. And he goes to this woman's house and she sees like a doormat that is reminiscent of something that her mother would have put together. And it's kind of this offhanded, like, oh yeah, great, whatever it is. But there are clues there. If you're paying attention, you go, oh, so this lady is not everything she seems to be. Something's up with her. In any event, she was fantastic. Ann Dowd was great. But Ann Dowd's character leads me to what was probably the biggest, I think, letdown of the movie for me, which was the movie has obviously there's like the supernatural sort of slant to it, which when you start getting into the weeds of that transition in the plot, for me, it lost a bit of steam. Because again, I said this about Weapons. I said this about a few other movies within the genre, which is in horror movies, there's only so many things the nugget, the heart of the story could be. It's a ghost story, it's a story about whatever, demons, some monsters trying to kill you, some kind of you're tapping into the occult where you're bringing in witches and or Lucifer himself or whatever it is. There's only so many things you can you can do. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's you just go, oh, okay, that's okay. I think the trick is how it's executed. Where this film ends up, it seemed to drop the my engagement a little bit. It was like there was this rise of appreciation for the execution of the movie, and then certain things are revealed. It starts to feel like, oh, it was just that. That's all this is. Oh, there's some like cult group. There's okay, which that felt like less. Which honestly, it reminded me of Midsummer in that way. But Midsummer's execution is so much more different. It's different in a way than this is. And I think at the end of the day, regardless of what the real reveals are in a movie like this, what helped me after watching it was looking at it. What helped me still maintain my appreciation for the movie and not have it drop all the way out. Like, I don't think that would have been possible because there's so much about this movie that is really well done. So it's hard to not appreciate it. But I think at the end of the day, what stuck with me was looking at all these other things that as exaggerations for the real feelings, the real stuff. So to me, this movie is about family grief, family trauma, and how that can be passed down through generations. And that's the movie. All the other stuff with like spirits, supernatural stuff, is just, those things are things that exaggerate the stuff that's already there. They're metaphors for the real stuff that you're dealing with. And I think when I look at it like that, the movie's still tight. It's still great. It's very tightly wound. It's very well done, well made. When I step away from that and looking at it as a movie, then it does drop in quality a little bit for me, just because like, oh, that's what you were leading up to. That's what the grandmother was a part of, which feels kind of run of the mill, but the execution was not. And so Hereditary gets credit just for that alone, because it was so well executed. Yes, this movie is disturbing, but for me, it was more emotional than that. I was more just like, feeling the grief of the family. I was in it with the family, and that was what I was carrying with me as I watched this movie. And there were some unsettling pieces about it, but it was not as like, oh, this is the scariest thing since The Exorcist, or it's the scariest movie ever made. That may be true for some people. That was not the case for me. Hereditary is still very much worth a look. If you haven't seen it, definitely check out Hereditary, because it's very well written, supremely well acted, very well shot. Definitely one of the movies you wanna if you like horror movies, this is one of those ones that should definitely be on your list to check out. With that, that's going to do it for this review of Hereditary. If you're still hanging around, thank you again for taking the time to check this review out. And let me know what you thought. If you've seen it or you haven't seen it, or if you want to say anything, just say some stuff in the comments, and then we'll engage in the conversation. But in the meantime, I'm getting out of here. Got to get ready for Halloween. Halloween is here. More reviews coming up. Meantime, take it easy, and I'll see you in the next video.